Well, God bless you, and thanks. If you're joining us again for the first time, we're in a series called Extravagant Generosity, and in this series, we're in part 6. We're talking about crushing financial stress, and you might want to ask the question, why are we talking about this at church? It's because this is the place where we need to talk about this. We are doing a 7-week series. This is part 6. But when we talk about extravagant generosity, we showed you last week and all the previous weeks, we have several nonprofit partners that we support who are preparing right now for the Thanksgiving season and Christmas season to be able to give to those in need. And we want to add our strength to that. And we invite you to add your strength with us so that we can do that. And we're going to do this whether you give or not. But our goal is that everyone participates. The goal is that everyone participate. And so we asked you when we first started the series to give $39.95. That's just a number. If you want to make it $40, that's fine. But hopefully everybody can afford $40. Then that actually helps a number of different organizations that we are giving to. And today I won't scroll those for you until later. But I wanted to make sure that you're aware of, while we're talking about these financial issues and during this series, it's so that we can be in a better position later on in our life to do the things that we really want to do, whether that's be able to give to others when we want to, or be able to do the things that you really, really want to do. And so I have a couple of things that I want to share with you today. There are a lot of common beliefs about financial stress. One is that people believe that if you have more money, that you'll be happier. And I think some of you probably already realize that that's not necessarily true. It could be true in some instances. As a matter of fact, Princeton University did a study. It's been about 10 years ago, but they did a study, and they looked at people day-to-day happiness. And in this study, they said it actually increases with income until you get up to about $75,000. Then once you make about $75,000, it starts to plateau. The happiness starts to plateau with the amount of increase in money that you make. Because we know there are happy people with little money, there are happy people with a lot of money, and there are unhappy people in both of those categories. You are aware of those people, I'm aware of those people. But there's been a recent study that was done, and it was actually done to debunk this study. And during this study, they said that, the well-being of people and happiness actually increased with the income, no matter how high it got. But the bottom line is that people who equate money with happiness, even this latter study, people who equate money with happiness are generally less happy than people who do not equate money with happiness. And so the problem is, when you make more money, something else happens. Like the more money you make, here's the fact. People who earn more money tend to be more anxious or worried about their money. Not everybody, but that's the tendency. The more money you have, the more money you need to protect, the more money you need to make sure that, nobody else takes from you, and you start doing things to protect that money. And those are just normal things that you would normally do. And remember last week we talked about the appetite for more increases as it's fed. We talked about greed last week. And so the more you desire something and the more you feed it, the more you desire it. And Jesus called that greed, and we need to understand and get a handle on that. You're not a bad person. That's just normal. Our culture sets us up for this kind of behavior. For example, I have some statistics that I want to just share with you, just so you can see, what's going on in the world around you, or you can see some numbers that fit what you see, because you already see it. For example, our culture sets us up for this kind of behavior because, number one, we have different ads and commercials and social media that tell us we need these things. There are things that they make us feel like we need. You may or may not actually need them, but you want them, and then that want becomes a need. So social media, it feeds us this, and it makes you feel like you are not as important if you don't have the same thing that everybody else has. And you're not in a bad category. You don't have to feel like you're a bad person because of this. You, me, and everybody else you know find ourselves in this situation. There are certain things when it comes out and it's new, it's shiny, I want it. And then when they show it to me every time I turn on my computer or my phone, then it just makes me want it even more. But I want to show you something that's happened over the years. Here, the average size home, 50 years ago was 3 times smaller than it is today. In other words, the homes that we live in now are 3 times bigger than they were, and that's the average size. A lot of us, since we earn more money now compared to our parents did 50 years ago, our homes are bigger anyway. But the fact that we have bigger homes, here's my point, is we accumulate more stuff than we need. And now we have homes that are bigger than we ever had before, and yet we keep purchasing more stuff that can fit in the bigger house. And if you don't believe me, look in your garage. We store stuff in the garage, even though we got this big house. Now we got stuff in the house, and we have stuff in the garage. We can't fit 1 car in our 2.5 car garage because the garage is full of stuff. It's, some of that stuff we don't even use anymore. And then when we run out of space in the garage, guess what we do next? Then we rent some storage units. We go get some storage. So I looked into the global storage market. That's a $48 billion industry. The stuff we can't fit in our house, just because we have stuff. The stuff we can't fit in the house, we can't fit in the basement, we can't fit in the garage, then we go rent a storage unit. And the global storage market is $48 billion. But here's what's even worse for us who live in America. And that is, in the United States, the storage market is $39.5 billion. We're 75% of the entire market. Just for the whole, in the rest of the world, we are 75% of all storage market. And that's because we have so much stuff in our house, so much stuff in the garage, so much stuff in the basement that we're no longer using, and we can't. Now we rent a storage unit, and now in this storage unit, we have stuff in that storage unit or in the basement or in the garage that not only are we not using it, you know what else? We are still paying on some of that stuff. That's what's really, really bad. We're still paying on some of that stuff, and we're paying the storage unit fee monthly to keep it. So you can see how financial stress starts to build up and sneak up on you because there's just stuff that's just going on in your financial life that you just have not grabbed a hold of and got your hands on yet. But you need to, which brings us to my next point, and that's this. 78% of paychecks, 78% of us in America, this is in America, this is a Dave Ramsey study, 78% of Americans, including all income brackets, that's the poor people, middle class people, lower class people, upper class people, 78% of all income earners live paycheck to paycheck. I need to pause right there. We live paycheck to paycheck. And sometimes I do get a little emotional about these things because, we just don't teach it in church. We don't teach people how to, and I guess we figure they'll learn it in school. Guess what? You don't learn it in school either. And so I have learned some things over the years that I want to share with you in a minute here. But 78%, can you imagine that 78% of people live paycheck to paycheck? In other words, they can't wait for the next paycheck before they run out of the last paycheck. And then 53% of those people living paycheck to paycheck, they earn over $50,000 a year, between $50K and $100K. They earn $50 to $100K a year, and they still live paycheck to paycheck. So you can see, making more money doesn't necessarily change the situation. And one more category, 40% of people who live paycheck to paycheck, they make more than $100,000 a year. If we don't take care of our financial problems, if we don't find out what they really are, in other words, my question is, why is this happening to us? Why do we have to live paycheck to paycheck? It seems like if I make $50,000 a year and I'm struggling, then if I could get a raise or get married and somebody else is bringing money in the household too, and we increase to $100,000, seems like that should take care of my financial problems, right? It seems like it would, but why doesn't it? Why doesn't that take care of the issue? So when we live paycheck to paycheck and we have all these different kinds of situations, you see, I learned some things some years ago in the 80s. I became a licensed insurance agent, licensed securities, and licensed in mutual funds. And so I learned some things about money, but I had a great teacher. I had a great coach, a great mentor who's still my financial mentor. And we taught married people, our market was married people who were young, and we taught them how to save money and get in life insurance. So if something happened, that, their family wouldn't be devastated. And so you're looking at somebody today who have, I've had to actually give someone an insurance check because their loved one passed away. And it makes a difference when I can feel like I actually did something that makes a difference. But it's not just insurance, but my mentor taught me some good financial things here. For example, right now I don't service them anymore, but I've had clients who, have grown nest eggs to over $1 million to retire. I have clients who've retired. I have clients who did not lose any money in the last stock market loss and all those kinds of things. But one of the good things, this coach of mine, he taught me that, when we were younger, our market was younger people. And now those same people are older, but in any of those categories, there are still people who don't have money. And for us to make money, we had to find people who had money. So what we did in our office was we gave back to the community by inviting people who didn't have the money to come in, and we taught them things like budgeting, and we taught them how to get out of debt and how to pay off their homes and how to do multiple things where financial stress just grabs you because it takes over you. It grabs relationships. It affects your relationships. And we sat down, and he taught me this. Dave, my friend Dave Savage, taught me this. We sat down, and we'd have a couple sit down, and we draw like a pie. I wish I could show you that. We draw like a pie, and we'd say, out of this 100% of debt, what part of this do you feel that you're responsible for? And we'd ask each one that question. And when we start off, the couple would be sitting farther and farther apart. But after a few sessions of us talking to them and them getting a handle on this, you could see them sit closer together when we were actually talking to them. But when I see this, and I see what's happening now, I hope there's some 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds listening to me today who realize that, you don't need to fall into the same trap that we fell into when we were younger. You need to get a handle on those kinds of things. And so I have, some skills when it comes to this. Even though I didn't renew my license once I've been full-time in ministry, there's still some things that I still refer back to the people at my office. And so, but it makes me mad. It makes me, it seems like financial stress takes so much from us. And so I have a little demonstration for you today that I want to, how many of you saw the movie Taken? Just wave your hand or, wave your chat. Put something in the chat. How many of you saw the movie Taken? And so this is how I feel like Brian Mills did in that movie when somebody took something from him. Somebody's taking stuff from you and from me that we need to make sure that we understand what's happening. And so I have a little demonstration for you. And so take a look here, at what we're going to show you. So here, I'm Brian Mills now. I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. If you want money or ransom, I have no money. But what I do have are a particular set of skills that I've acquired over a long career, and skills that make me a nightmare for people like you. If you let my daughter go, that'll be the end of it. I will not look for you. I will not pursue you. But if you don't, I will look for you. I will find you. And I will kill you. Then you hear that silence. But that's the attitude we need to have when it comes to financial stress. That's the attitude we need to have. That's taking stuff away from us. We need to look for it, pursue it, and kill it. So here's a question I have for you today. Are you ready for my question? All right. Here's my question for you today. And that question is this. How much more money do you need to balance your budget or stop spending more than you make? How much? Think for a minute. Make a mental note or write that number down. If your annual salary is $75,000 a year, what would you need? 10% more, 20% more, 33% more? 33% more would be $100,000 basically. If you make 75 and you got a $25,000 raise, could you then balance your budget or stop spending more than you make? That's one question. I have a second question for you. How much more money would you need to just get entirely out of debt and stay out of debt? Again, think for a moment. Make a mental note of that number what would it take? Another $50,000, $100,000? What number? Give me a number. Make a mental note if you need to. Write that number down, or if you're not ashamed, put it in the chat window. What's your lump sum number? How much more do you need in order to get out of debt and stay out of debt? I'm going to try to answer these questions for you today, because if you remember last week, we talked about the appetite for more increases as it's fed. Remember we said that? In other words, the more you make, the more you consume. You're not a bad person because this happened. Our culture set us up for this, as I just showed you. When we make more, we consume more. But the reason that this happened is because our appetites don't change. Our unchanged appetite habits, our habits don't change. What's really bad is where all this leads us to. This leads us to the point where we always want more, even though we don't have more. And when we get more, we'll still always want more. And the really bad thing is that this leads us to the financial stress that many of us have today. And this financial stress impacts not just relationships, but even relationships. It impacts your mental health. When you are not relaxed, when you may be a creative person if you didn't have to deal with the financial stress that you're dealing with, you maybe could create some things that could actually make you and your family, wealthy for the rest of your life. But if you're focused on the financial stress and that's what's bogging you down, that's what's beating on you, then you're cutting yourself short from the things that you actually would be able to do. And I call this a worry cycle. This all leads to this cycle of worrying where you start to think about what you need and what you don't have. And now you're not thinking about how to get what you don't have. You're thinking about what you don't have. And you're thinking, and it just builds up stress because now that you don't have it, you get depressed because you don't feel like you're not making as much as you should make and you don't have what you should have. And then it's a cycle that we start ourselves in, that we run over and over and over and over again. And so here's what Jesus said about this. And remember, we talked about this. This is at the end of that session that we talked about last week when Jesus addressed, there was a large crowd. Remember, we talked about the large crowd, that there were many thousands pushing on each other, kicking, trying to get to Jesus, shoving each other, trampling on others. And Jesus was focused on his disciples. But then remember, this anonymous man in the crowd said, "Hey, teacher, make my brother share the inheritance with me." And remember, Jesus would not engage in that, but Jesus told him a parable about the rich man who got more and more and said, "What am I going to do with all this stuff I have? I don't know what to do with it." Remember all that? Well, right after Jesus finished telling this story, this is what he said. It said, "Then Jesus said to his disciples, 'Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will wear.'" You see, these people and everybody, even you and me today, what people show us today, the advertising agencies, everything, it's about what we can eat or what we can wear. And what we can wear goes into other categories now, what we can drive. They weren't driving anything back in those days. But it just expands into all the different things that you could desire that you don't have, that you want, that you see other people with. And so what Jesus is saying here is, do not worry about those things. Do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. And remember now, when he, let me back up, I'm going to review a couple of verses here. Remember last week we read this verse. It says, "But God said to him, 'You fool,'" the rich man at the very end. He said, "This very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who's going to get all the stuff that you prepared for?" So the point was, with this rich man, he was preparing all this stuff. There was nothing wrong with him saving, but he was saving it all for himself. He was focused only on himself. And so the point was, Jesus is saying, now who's going to get what you prepared for yourself? In other words, you really don't own anything. That's the key. You and I, even the things that we think we own, we don't own them. If we really owned them, we could take them with us when we die, right? But you don't own anything. You can't take it with you when you leave. So God's plan, which has always been his plan, is since you can't take it with you anyway, do something with it that you can take with you, that will go into the next life with you. And that's a lifestyle of generosity. And that's what we're going to specifically talk about, a lifestyle of generosity next week. But in this verse, Jesus went on to tell them, he said, this is what will happen to those people who store things up for themselves but are not rich towards God. They'll end up just like this man. And then that next verse actually said, he said to them, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life." When you focus on your life and your life only, you'll store things up, you'll begin to hoard things, and then you'll start to worry about how you're going to keep it and how you're going to make sure nobody else takes it away from you. But then here's what worry actually is. And this is my definition of worry. Worry happens when, first of all, it happens in the mind. Worry happens in your mind. And when your active thinking part of your mind, not your subconscious, in your active thinking mind, where you normally would be searching for and recognizing solutions based on what's already in your subconscious, you're trying to figure out solutions. Instead of looking for solutions, worry gives way to that by giving in to anxiety, giving in to stress, giving in to uneasiness. And that's when you start to stop focusing on solutions and you start you're settling on the anxiety. You're just settling, and then anxiety sets in, stress sets in. So worry is when you give up that control. You give up that control and you stop hoping for a solution. You give up on all of that and you allow your mind to dwell on just the difficulty. You're just dwelling on what you don't have and what you might not have and what may happen and what did happen, both ways. What did happen and what may happen in the future, whatever expected trouble may happen, that's turning over and over and over in your mind. That's what worry is. And that, when you're doing that, you can't come up with a solution. You're not even focusing on a solution anymore. As a matter of fact, that's what Jesus is saying. Don't do this. Don't do this, which means dwell on the solution. Keep looking for solutions. Keep searching for answers. God, he then says to them, God knows you have needs of these things. So if you keep looking, then God can reveal it to you. But if you're not looking, you're not, even if it popped up in front of you, you're not going to see it. And so here are 5 top worries, that we have. We worry about our health. We worry about safety. We worry about money. We worry about relationships. All these things and what others think. We worry about what others think. But do you know, according to most studies, what the top and the number one of all worries are? The number one worry is money. That's the number one worry. It moves to the top of the list. And so with money being at the top of the list, my question is, and that I think we need answers to, how do you stop worrying about money? How do you stop worrying about money? That's what I want to talk about today. How do you stop worrying about money? In other words, when you think about it, and we just showed you, earning more money does not solve the problem. You still worry about money when you earn more money. And when you earn more, then you're still worried about what you don't have because you've increased your appetite based on what you earn. You've increased your lifestyle ahead of being able to step away from being controlled by those things, and you're allowing those things to still control you. You know what else does not solve the problem? Even saving money does not solve the problem of worry. You're starting to worry about losing what you saved. And so there has to be something that you can do that can stop you from worrying no matter how much money you have, whether you have a little or whether you have a lot. We need to learn how to stop worrying about it. And the answer is not to give your money to the church. That's not what I'm saying. And just give your money away. Now that you give, we've done these scriptures where we tell people give and it'll be given unto you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over with the Lord, given to your bosom. And you give and you give and you give. And if you don't do some other things, you ain't going to have no money in your bosom. You ain't going to have nothing. And so you need to do some other things besides just giving. And that wasn't Jesus' main point even when he said that. Even when he's saying this, because he's not saying that this man was a terrible man because he saved things. He ended up being what Jesus called a fool because he was saving it all for himself as if he was going to live forever. Because Jesus' main point was, what will you do? What's going to happen to all the stuff that you've accumulated? Who's going to use that now? Somebody else. Somebody else is going to have that, not you. And so Jesus's point was in the next verse, he says, for life is more than food and the body is more than clothes. And he goes on to say, you can't even add 1 hour to your life by worrying, by trying to live, trying to do the things to live. You can't add 1 more hour, 1 more minute, 1 second. You can't add any more time to your life by worrying. As a matter of fact, you actually are probably taking away some of your life by worrying. But Jesus goes on to give an example, and he talked about the ravens. He said, he's really comparing it to birds, and we've seen where he compared it to birds before. where, he says, look at the birds. God even cares about the birds. But in this particular verse, and I don't have the verse there for you, but he says, look at the ravens. Consider the ravens. Now, a raven is a kind of bird that eats almost anything. He said they don't store anything, they don't sow, they don't reap. In other words, they don't even work. There are other animals that do work and save up and store stuff for the winter and that. He said ravens don't do that. They don't store anything. They don't plant anything. They don't reap anything. They don't work, but they just eat whatever, even dead things. But what he's saying here is that he says God feeds them, and you are more valuable than birds. You're more valuable than birds. And then he goes on to say, then who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life? Since you can't do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? You can't add anything to your life. And then after he talks about the ravens, he said, how about wildflowers and how the wildflowers grow? I think some translations say call these lilies. But look at how wildflowers grow and consider the wildflowers. No one plants those things. Those are wildflowers. Nobody worked to, contribute to their growth, to contribute to their beauty. Some of them are beautiful. And then he gave a comparison. He said, yet even King Solomon was not dressed as fly as some of these flowers are, and when you do some study about how King Solomon, even King David dressed, they did some serious stuff as far as dressing. As a matter of fact, when we talk about royal purple, that's part of where some of that comes from. You couldn't find purple. Purple was not something you found. They went across the seas and got different things to create different dyes to come up and make purple so that it could be their royal color. And Jesus is saying even King Solomon was not dressed like some of these wildflowers that do nothing to grow. And so then he goes and put those two things together, because he says, now, if God clothed the grass of the field, which is here today and gone tomorrow, how much more will he clothe you? And here's the point, that little, 4-letter phrase there at the end, you of little faith. Little faith. In other words, little faith meaning not something that you need to muster up and have more of, like I'm going to use my faith. No, you have little confidence in God's ability through you to supply you with what you need. You need to have confidence in God's ability through you to supply yourself with the things that you need. And know that whatever I need, God's going to use me or use somebody to help me get what I need. And that's the confidence we need to build. And so he says in the next verse, so don't set your heart on what you will eat or drink, and don't worry about that. And don't set your heart, on the things that you need to wear. He says, for the pagans, they run after all of those things. And the key is your Father knows that you need these things. Your Father knows that you need them. That's the key. If you had confidence in him, confidence in God, you would know that your Father, your God, knows that you need these things, and he will make sure that you have what you need. So what we need to do is increase our confidence in God. We need to increase our concern for what to the point where you can change your focus. Increase your confidence in God to the point where you can change your focus and your concern for yourself to what God is concerned about. What is God concerned about? And you'll find out that God is concerned about people. That's what he's concerned about. And you are a person, you are a people, but when you focus only on yourself, you're turning inward the energy that needs to go outward. And when you turn that energy outward, then God can actually infuse you with the energy you need so that it can go out. And you'll earn more than what you need for yourself. You'll earn some for others. And that's the key. And that's why he says in that next verse, he says, but seek first his kingdom. Seek first the kingdom of God, and his righteousness, and these things will be added to you as well. Seek and focus on what God cares about. Seek and focus on what God's kingdom is all about, and that's about people. See, when you seek and focus on what God is seeking and looking at, then God will make sure that you have. And it's not like it's some magic. It's that when you turn your focus off of yourself, there is energy that's provided to you there, whether that energy is in the form of wisdom, or knowledge, or inventions, or connections with other people. But there's energy that God makes sure that you get, that now you can actually use to generate more for yourself and more for others. And I have an example of this, in Philippians, the Apostle Paul, where he talks about this a little bit. He said, he's talking to the Philippians who had in the past had not been able to give to him or support him as a missionary. Just the same kind of thing that we're doing now with people who need. We're trying to gather money so that we can give to them so they can have what they need. That's part of what a church in a community is all about. If a church is in a community and the church don't make a difference in the community, the church doesn't need to make what are they doing in the community? But just having people come and hear what you're saying today and then go out and talk about I went to church and feel good because they went to church. That's not what church is all about. As a matter of fact, after this series, we're going to talk about what church is all about. And so let me get back to what I'm talking about today. Paul said to the Philippians here, he said, I rejoiced greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. In other words, they had not been able to give to him before, but now they have. He said, indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. In other words, they couldn't support him previously, but now they could, and they are. So Paul understood and accepted something here. And he goes on to say, the reason he's saying this is he's accepted God's providence. And that's kind of what I'm talking about when I say, trust God, believe what God is saying and doing in your life right now, that God is actually involved. When you get God involved in your finances, then you can actually believe that he is trying to make things happen for you that needs to happen for you. And so Paul is saying to these people, you were concerned, but you didn't have an opportunity to show it. But I have accepted God's providence that even at the time when you couldn't do it, he said, I believe that God's arrangement of things beforehand fulfills his purpose. That's really what God's providence is all about. When God arranged things beforehand, before they even happen, God arranged things beforehand to fulfill his purpose. So Paul goes on to say to these people, these Philippians, he says, I'm not saying this because I'm in need. I'm not saying this because I have this need, for I have learned, and this is what he says, I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstance. Content, he's just saying, I'm at rest with wherever God has me right now. I'm right here right now. I don't have enough to do what I think I need to do, but I am learning to be content with that right now because I trust God that God is going to make things all right. Despite what's happened around me, not right now, and this is not natural, but despite what's happening around me right now, I'm resting in God where I am right now. And so God teaches us contentment depending on what's going on in our lives and depending on him. He teaches us contentment through the ups and downs of circumstances. You and I, we both go up in circumstances and down. We go up in income and down. And God teaches us in those things, how to depend on him. That's what he wants us to do. And that's what contentment is learning to depend on him in the ups. And that's really hard. Some of us, we learn to depend on God when we're down. That's when we start praying real hard and getting everybody else to pray with us and pray for us. But when we're up, we tend to feel like we don't need much. And so God wants us to learn how to depend on him when we're up and we're earning way more than we could ever consume, and also when we're down, when we're consuming everything that we can make, he wants us to learn to depend on him. And so Paul goes on to say to this congregation that this church that he's talking to, he says, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I know the difference. And what I've learned, and he says it's a secret, that same verse. He says, I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. That's where we got to move to. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or whether living in plenty or in want. And when he says this, now this verse comes just before this famous verse that many of you already know, and you're waiting for me to get to the, Philippians 4:13. You're just waiting for me to get there. But, many of us Christians, we quote this scripture, we've adopted it without really understanding the real impact that inspired the actual statement that Paul said when he said it. And that's this verse. You've heard this before. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And that's the King James Version. But in the NIV, it says, I can do all this through him who gives me strength. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. The King James again, the King James is I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But here's what Paul is really saying here. I can do life, the same assignment that God gave me, that before you Philippians were able to give me and support me. He says, I can do life with a little and I can do life with a lot. My focus is on my relationship with Christ who gives me the life, not on the things that I don't have that I feel that I need in order to do life. I can do life with a little. I can do life with a lot. My focus is on him. So contentment is this. Contentment is knowing that whatever I need, whenever I need it, that it is supplied through my relationship with God through Jesus Christ, who gives me all things. And 1 Timothy says to richly enjoy. So my focus is on that relationship. My focus is on my relationship with Christ, who gives me the life, who gives me the things. See, when I start focusing on the things, then I kind of block the connection of the life that actually gives me that I'm infused with, so that I can have the life to produce the things. But it's so easy to start focusing on the things. So here's your challenge today. Your challenge today is this, to take several action steps. I want you to take some steps today, this week. Take several action steps towards changing your financial situation, whether it's good or bad. If it's good, make it better. If it's bad, make it good. But what you want to do is crush this financial stress and this mental stress that's producing these things in our life. And what I want you to do is understand a few concepts. So most of us, what we experience and what we think is financial stress or money problems is really not money problems. Sometimes it is relationship problems. Sometimes it is communication problems. But really, the problems are bigger than relationship. It's bigger than communication. When you look at the fact that the more you have, the more we want and the more we need with our quality upgrades, then something is going on when money has that kind of a hold on us, and we need to figure out how to break free of that. When your personal finances, it really breaks into what I call three specific problems. Your personal financial problems breaks into three specific problems. And when we understand this, and we can't finish all this today, but when you understand this, then the more we have, the more we want, the more we need, you can actually get a grip on that and make sure that doesn't grab hold of your life. But here are the real top three things that are problems. When our money problems is really a spiritual problem, it's a self-control problem, and it's a self-discipline problem. And I'm at least define what the difference is here for you, because we need to get a hold on this. The more we have, the more we want, the more we need. And therefore, every every single thing that we ever increase and get, we consume it on ourselves and we gobble it up. But here, this is what worry really is. See, worry is a spiritual problem. You know, even if you don't believe in God, and even if you don't believe in Jesus, you know, if you don't believe that he exists, worrying does not add anything to your life. He said that, but even if you don't believe in him today, worry does not add any time to your life. You know, when Jesus said, don't worry about what to eat and what to wear, that's consumerism. Those are the things we consume. Most of the things that we purchase, even on credit, and we spend money and then pay more money to have it because we want it now instead of waiting till we get the money to pay for it and we pay interest on it. Most of those things we consume before we're ever done paying for it. It's not even worth what we pay for it, and we're still paying for it. That's consumerism. And that's why Jesus said, your Father knows that you have need of these things, but he said, seek his kingdom. Remember, seek his kingdom first. So you can shift your focus from yourself to what he's concerned about. And then he will add these things to you. And the adding is not magic. I used to think that. I used to think, okay, if I just give some money to the church, then the things that I need, God's just going to make sure I have them. No, God will inspire you to do some things that you can have it. He'll inspire others. There are times when others will be involved. There'll be connections that you don't have now that you need, that those connections will make the difference. But now you have an open mind and you're not focusing on the problem and you're not worrying about it. See, worrying is a spiritual problem that stops you in your tracks from moving forward. And then the other thing is the self-control problem. Spending more than we make, that's a self-control problem. You know, that's something you need to stop doing. Self-control is something you need to stop. You know, that's the difference between self-control and self-discipline. Even the dictionary kind of combines those two things, but they're different. Self-control is when you can stop something even in the act. Let's say if it's eating and you know you don't need that third donut and you got it in your hand. Self-control is when you can put it down, you know you don't need that, and you can put that down. That's self-control. Same thing with spending. When you're spending more than you make, you need to know how much you're making, and then you can see how much you have to spend and make sure you don't spend more than you make. But sometimes we spend without even looking. And so self-control is, at least I'm going to look before I spend and get a handle on that. And then the next category of problems is really not, a money problem. It's a self-discipline problem. If you're not saving and you're not getting out of debt, that's a self-discipline problem. Self-discipline is something that you need to start doing. Discipline is something that you do instead. For example, if we go back to our donut example, if you say, okay, I need to be healthy, I need to lose some weight, and I have a habit of eating these donuts, then self-control is stopping yourself from eating the donuts. But self-discipline is when you say that I'm going to eat more vegetables, and you actually, now this is something you need to start doing. I'm going to start eating more vegetables. I'm going to put vegetables in front of me. I'm going to have vegetables in my refrigerator instead of donuts on my counter, so that when I see it, then I'm more likely to grab a carrot instead of grabbing a donut. And see, that's what discipline is. Even when it's not pleasant, you don't feel like it, because you may add exercise to this. I know I need to exercise, but I don't feel like it. Well, self-discipline is when you exercise anyway. You don't feel like it, but you do it anyway. Discipline yourself or you will worry. If you don't exercise self-control and if you don't exercise self-discipline, you will worry. So your challenge is to move from worry to contentment. And contentment is not just that I'm satisfied with everything the way it is and I don't ever need to change anything. Contentment is different than that. It is when I'm content forever because of where I am. You need to be content where you're forever moving. You're forever moving from worry to contentment, because you're still going to be tempted to worry. So you're moving from worry to contentment. It's more than just a one-time decision. You're moving. You're always active, moving from worry to contentment. And that's the first part of your challenge today, is to move from worry to contentment. Make that decision, but it's more than just a decision. See, when here's the first action step in moving. You need to first face your situation and realize that you can't fix it if you don't see it. You'll never stop spending more than you make if you don't start looking at what you make and what you have left before you spend. You need to look at your budget. Makes sense, right? I know that sounds so simple, but we don't practice that. That's how we start to get into problems. Or say you make enough where you don't need to look. You need to learn to look even if you know I made more and this is not going to affect and impact me. You need to know what your budget is and begin to spend accordingly to your budget. And so that's the first thing, is look at your budget. The next thing is your income and the amount of cash coming in. You need to look at that. Look at what you got coming in. And then expenses. Look at the amount of what you're spending. And then look at the amount that you owe. Look at all of those things. And then your second step is discovering where your money is going. Where is it going? It's going somewhere. Where is this money going? You need to focus on those things. And so the key is this. Stop focusing on the financial problems, which is worry, and rest in the concept that God knows what I need and God provides what I need. Even if you don't know how he's going to do it, you need to learn how to trust him and depend on him for doing what he said that he would do. And then remember this. You need to learn to manage your money and financial habits. That's something you need to do. That you don't need prayer for that. You need to do that. You need to manage your money and your financial habits and not try to manage the stress. We try to manage the stress. We go talk to therapists about the stress. Well, if your therapist need to focus you back onto your habits so that you can create some good money habits. But stop focusing on the stress of where your unhealthy money habits have taken you. Whatever skills you have, whatever talents you have, whatever gifts you have, start to focus on those things that God has given you and use those things with some new financial habits to overcome that desire to just worry and worry and worry and worry. That's how you crush financial stress. Stop worrying and get to work on those things that you need to work on. So I want to pray with you today. Remember, before I pray with you, remember next week. Next week we're going to talk about understanding the debt cycle. And this is going to be the last session of the Extravagant series that we're in. And we're going to talk about prioritizing your budget. And then the title of it is Generosity as a Lifestyle. That's really what it's all about. So that's what we're going to talk about next week. So get ready for next week. But right now, let me pray for you for this week. I know we talked about some hard things, some things that we all need to learn to do, and we need to all put in our, whatever you call your hope chest or your chest of things that you know you need to do. There's some things you need to do. There's some things that you need to learn. There's some things that you need to stop doing. And so I just want to pray for you right now. Father, we thank you right now in Jesus' name for this message. We thank you for giving us insight on crushing financial stress, crushing the tendency to worry. We look to you today, and I pray that you would move on the hearts of those that are listening to me, that are hearing me right now. In Jesus' name, God, give them the courage to take a step today to crush the stress that's in their lives financially, to crush the worry, to get rid of the worry, to learn to live depending on you, whether they have much or whether they have little. We look to you and we depend on you. In Jesus' name, amen.